Yay! Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Guess what today is? Ask us anything. Okay, so I just want to say to the folks online, I'm working 2 devices behind the scenes, but we're live. Petra has YouTube on her device. I have Facebook on my device. So if you're on either one of those streams, you can put questions in the chat and we're going to answer them, or at least do our best to get to as many questions as we can. So, and of course, in the room. So we got a mic in the room, and I've already got a couple of questions that people have already sent to us. So we'll start with that, but be thinking here on campus and then online. What questions do you have? We primarily would love to answer them about anything to do with abundance and prosperity, but it can be anything spiritual. You know, there may be some questions we wouldn't answer, but anything spiritual we would.
Right? Really? There's a question we wouldn't answer?
Well, anyway, let's don't test them. Anyway,
feel free to test us.
Feel free to test us. Okay, so I got a couple of questions that came in, and that is, let's start with this one. Please explain limiting beliefs. Travis wants to know that from Dallas or Tavis. But anyway, Tavis, we're got you going. Please explain limiting beliefs. Why don't you take that one?
All right. Well, our song was beautifully setting us up to have a conversation about limiting beliefs. Right? Our limiting beliefs are the false ideas that we have about ourselves. They usually start with things we're told as a child, and then they are also ways in which we interpret what happened to us as a child, which we then codify in our minds about life and about ourselves. So let's say we get invited to play in a softball game, and maybe we're not quite old enough yet, or we're not very good at it yet because we haven't had a lot of practice, and we don't do well, and maybe some of the kids laugh at us. And so we can easily create a belief, don't try anything new, it's dangerous, or I'm not very good at sports, or I don't like to play group games because people aren't very nice. Do you see, there's no just one size fits all limiting belief. It's however we interpret that. And then when that gets added to things we might be told by family members, by kids at school, can also be very damaging, by society, even, all the messages we get as young people, girls about their weight, boys about how they're supposed to look and behave, all those kinds of messages. And these beliefs keep us from expressing all of ourselves. That's why they're called limiting beliefs, because they make us smaller. And they keep us from trying things, they keep us from expressing ourselves, and they keep us from really experiencing our own inner beauty and magnificence. And none of us are the same as anybody else, right? We're all unique and different. There's no such thing as normal, right? We've given up that long ago, I hope. But we don't feel good about our unique set of ways of showing up in the world. And so then we try to conform and fit in. And so those limiting beliefs live in our subconscious mind. And if you're studying neuroscience or neuroplasticity, if you do affirmations, all of that's designed to write over those old beliefs, write new ones.
Yay.
Yay.
And the universal presence and life itself is limitless. So, very good. Thank you. That was good. All right, let's see. We have another one.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so
raise your hand.
Raise your hand, and then I'll tell you when we're ready. Okay? Go ahead and hand her the mic, please. Okay. All right, we're ready.
So go ahead and share.
Petra, how do you find those limiting beliefs?
Oh man, that is a great question. That's a great question, Sharon. Okay.
I would start with begin to watch our language and have, I like language buddies. Have people start listening to my language, and then I have a language buddy right here. And so she will point out, like, really? You really believe that? Whatever. So that's the first thing I'm going to say. Begin to watch how I'm saying things and talking about things. Okay?
Yeah, and it's things like always and never, and this always happens to me, and and ask yourself, is that really something you want to keep affirming? And if it's not, you've found a limiting belief, right? Or you can ask yourself, do I really want my life to be based on this thought? That's a limiting belief. And then you can go to Byron Katie. Is it true? Is it really, really true? And that means we're jumping from our human experience to the things we know to be spiritually true. And if we pretend or we entertain the possibility that we are, in fact, spiritual beings, then we can ask ourselves, would this be true of a spiritual being? This thought that I have, this way of speaking? And so it really, and it's so what comes out of your mouth, but it's also what's going on up here, which is why the practices of mindfulness are so important, right? Because we start listening to what we're saying, and then we can inquire, is it true? Is it really, really true? Is this really what I want to base my life on? Is this really how I want my life to feel? These are all really great ways to explore our limiting beliefs. Thanks, great question.
Yeah, great question. In just a minute, let me do another question, and then we'll get a mic to you as well. And so here's another one that came in. What does abundance mean from a spiritual perspective? Thank you, Charlotte from Houston. What does abundance mean from a spiritual perspective? Well, I'll start with that, and that is if we look at life itself and how it expresses, this one life, this divine oceanic substance, as I like to call it, this universal presence, spirit, God, whatever you choose to call it. There is no beginning to it. There is no ending to it. There is no circumference, meaning there's no edge. There's no boundary. It's like boundless, right? And it shows up in pure abundance. If we look at on this one particular planet, in this particular Milky Way solar system, look how it all shows up. The grains of sand on a beach, we can't count it. The stars in the sky, we still can't count. Everything is always in its abundance. The water on the planet, all of this. And that is how life works. That's how life shows up. And it unabashedly gives to itself so fully and freely. It doesn't hold back. And because there's only one thing showing up, it also is receiving unabashedly. I think sometimes we forget that. It's the law of giving and receiving. So from a spiritual perspective, life itself, by its design, is the best expression of abundance there is. And that's the life because we are that. I mean, look, we're made up of, the majority of us is water. And that's why I use water a lot. It's like, I'm water. The ocean's water, everything's water. Turn on a faucet, it comes out. I expect the water to come out. Life itself shows up in its abundance. And that's truly it from a spiritual perspective. I think we try to put the human side only on abundance when it's purely spiritual to begin with.
Yeah, and I would add to that the abundance from a spiritual point of view is our ability to express our truth and our nature and our essential reality. I think it has to do with freedom and contribution and fulfillment. And it goes right along with the other side of limiting beliefs, right? When we are continually unhooking our limiting beliefs and we begin to imagine and experience the universal abundance, then that starts showing up as our ability to contribute our gift, our talents, our life by expressing who we are. Because, we're here for a reason and a purpose, and that is to be us and to express life and to give that unique, I don't always want to say talent like artistic talent or, even like you're good with numbers, but literally, quite frankly, your presence, your care, your compassion, your engagement, your desire to further life in some form or fashion, whether for you, your family, your tribe, your country, your business, all the ways in which we want to contribute to life and make a difference. And from a spiritual point of view, it is the abundance of the universe that allows us to do that. When we're not tapped into the abundance of the universe, we don't think we can. We don't have enough. We don't have enough time, enough talent, enough money, enough whatever it is, enough feeling about our self-worth and what our gifts might be, and so we don't. We don't do it, and as Karen said, right, then we're seeking constantly to get. And ultimately, from a spiritual point of view, abundance is the circulation of giving and receiving. But it starts with that gift of ourselves. And so the last thing I would say is when Karen says it unabashedly gives to itself, it's kind of a tricky thing to remember that this does not include us, right? So when Karen says it unabashedly gives to itself, what it means is it gives itself into all of creation. Science of Mind says love is spirit's self-givingness of itself into creation. It pours itself into all of creation. That's every physical thing, and that's also you and me and all beings. So it's not like giving it to itself in some inwardly turned way. Giving to itself means it's giving to all of us all of the time. And then our job is to pass it along.
Great. I think we have one up here,
Okay.
Daniel.
And
We have one
a
up
couple
here. Yep. And I
So-
got one online that I want to
Yeah.
use that came in
And
from
so-
Neil. Okay.
Great. And so I just want to say, I'm not getting any comments on YouTube. So for those of you on YouTube, I don't know whether you need to subscribe or whether you need to sign in to make a comment. But I'll keep looking for a comment or a question on YouTube.
Okay, we have someone here in the sanctuary, and we are ready.
So yes, about answering the question of how do you know when you don't, when you have negative beliefs, through your life, what you attract and what you have. For instance, me, it seems like everybody has the right to have what they want, but not me. Mm-hmm. And finally, I made a commitment to see where that came from, how that, and I'm seeing a therapist about it.
Good.
Because for me, for the longest time, I've known all this since the 80s. And it could, well, first of all, language barrier. And second of all, because I could not get it. I think the language had a lot to do, and the way I was brought up.
Yes.
So the affirmation did not work. And each time I says, I'm going to go to therapy, people, even here says, it's going to take forever. And it dawned on me, I says, I'm worth the time.
Yes.
And it was a big aha.
Yes.
Even though I'm angry at myself, don't get me wrong, even though I need to be kind to me. Mm-hmm. And people used to say, why are you so hard on yourself? And I never understood. I grew up in boarding school, French people, they can be really rough.
Right.
So it's not only the belief, but even your life, the way it is right now.
Yes.
That is how you can tell, and then be committed to find out really where that came from and how much you're still using it.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, absolutely. Therapy is fabulous work. And so no matter how long it takes, it is utterly worth doing. And then we make the spiritual shift to see it from a different point of view. That's what really rewrites those negative patterns. And so thank you so much for sharing that. I thought we had another one here.
I'm going to do one online,
Great.
and then we're going to go
Perfect.
right there. So Neil Hanner. Hey, Neil. Shout
Hi,
out.
Neil.
We love that you watch us all the time. What is the fine line between expressing abundance and prosperity and participating in consumerism and materialism? It's a great question. Yes, we got a yes. All right, you can start. I'll
Okay.
fill in.
So
I'm working the device here.
okay, I'm trying.
I know,
I'm trying to
you're
work
doing
my
great.
device.
You're doing great.
How do you know the difference? Well, it's very simple. Are you living from the inside out, or are you living from the outside in? It's very simple, right? So if we think that our abundance is going to make us happy, we are participating in consumerism. If we understand that our abundance is a way in which we express who we are, what's important to us, what we value, allows us to contribute to our own lives, the lives of our family, the lives of in our community and businesses and things like that. When we recognize that, then we are living from the inside out. And, we live in a world and have, since humanity, lived in the caves and made pots and rugs all the way up to today, we need stuff in our lives to support our lives. And so we recognize that the kind of abundance that we like is the kind of abundance that allows us to express as opposed to get something to make us happy. So for me, I'll give you an example. When I was 8 or 9, I started drawing my own house. I started, creating my own house and what it might look like. And I decided at one point, my favorite house, I still remember exactly what it looks like. And I mean a floor plan. Every room had an entirely different flavor. And I remember spending a lot of time on that. And as I got older, I noticed how passionate I was about the beauty of art and how much art and beauty helped me bring nature into my own home. And so in my teen years, I said, someday I'm going to have a home where virtually everything in it is handmade. It's a craft, it's an art, it comes from people I know, comes from people around the world. And I recognized that was my way of expressing beauty and my way of being a philanthropist and a patron of the arts. Because I think art is one of the ways in which we bring spirit present in a form that illuminates and changes consciousness. And so, when I bought my condo, and then Karen and I got together and we moved in together, if you walk around our house now, it's every piece of tchotchke in the house, right? Every piece of thing that's hanging on the wall, every one of them is a piece of art, a piece of craft. It's been purchased either here or around the world. And I see it as a reflection, first of all, of my spirit and a reflection of our spirit. And it gives me refuge and sanctuary. And it reminds me of the beauty that is the transcendent mystery that is forever seeking to be birthed in the world. That I want to birth in the world, that I want to be in the world, that if I could, I would open my heart and I would open yours and I would transfer that beauty into you because I see it in you and I know it's true about you and I want you to see it in yourself. And so the beauty in my home reminds me of that, especially when I'm feeling negative or limited, or I question myself or my abilities, or am I really doing it right? Or, oh my gosh, did we get through the pandemic in a good way? And, and all the ways in which we question ourselves. And so my home with that commitment reminds me of something so that I can come out into the world and give more. Do you see? Which is very different than collecting art and having somebody come into my home and say, oh yes, and this was worth this much money, and oh, and look at that, aren't I cool because I have that? Oh, and then having to acquire things so that I can say, oh, I have art, I'm so cool. Do you see the difference? That's how you know.
Great. All right. We got one right here in the sanctuary. We have time for a couple more.
Okay, awesome. I am very curious, as partners, as caretakers of this community, you have a lot going on. So I'm curious what your daily practice or spiritual practice looks like. How do you fill your cup to stay grounded? What does that practice look like for you daily?
Well, I'll start. Before I even get out of bed now, I start my practice. I actually intentionally now stay still, and I start being grateful and thinking about what I want this day to be. I don't really jump out of bed as fast as I did anymore, and I don't grab a device as fast as I did anymore, just so you know. That's been intentional over the past few months. And the other thing that's really become my spiritual practice is my photography. And being in nature and learning patience and feeling the presence, seeing the grass to the trees to the birds, because that's primarily what's in DFW are birds. So during the pandemic, I started finding myself out there to stay grounded during this time. And that's become my spiritual practice. The last thing I will say is the one that I use most frequently and most often is spiritual mind treatment. That's the one technology that is unique that Ernest Holmes brought to humanity. And once I learned that, I've been using it for myself. I've been using it for every person that I know and I love. I use it for every person that I know and I love. And every time I get to do a spiritual mind treatment, the great news is it may be for you, but it's actually for me as well. And that unfolds in our pictures. So those are my consistent spiritual practices that I do. Petra, you want to share?
Sure, absolutely. So I did years and years and years of meditation. Years and years and years of meditation. Until I discovered that I couldn't tell the difference between the time I was meditating and the time I wasn't. And that's my goal. My spiritual practice is to be in that centered, grounded state in the world. Because I remember when I first started meditating, well, first of all, it was really hard. And I was like, okay, I'm sitting on this cushion. Great, now what? And everybody's having these fabulous visions and flights of fancy, and they were, being all blissed out. And I was like, okay, I'm sitting on the cushion. That took a really long time. But I kept at it because I knew it was important. And then what I noticed is that I would start really feeling centered on my meditation cushion, and then I would get in my car, and I would get on the road, and I would get in traffic. And do you know how quickly I would get mad because all those people were ruining my bliss? You already got it, right? And so after many, many, many years of deep, profound commitment to meditation, I decided that as I could no longer tell the difference, I didn't get mad anymore, I didn't have those experiences, that my spiritual practice today is to be as conscious as I can, to be as awake as I can, to notice when my limiting beliefs are getting in the way, to notice when I am feeling petty or small or frightened or victimized, and each and every time to come back to my center. My ongoing spiritual practice is to breathe. The centering breath is the single anchor in my life, and I use it all the time. I also do a lot of spiritual mind treatment as I'm going to bed. I do my spiritual mind treatment for the people who are on my treatment list. I do my spiritual mind treatment for the planet, for social justice, for economic equity, for all of the support that I can give to the awakening of humanity. I try to go to sleep doing that so that I'll wake up doing it, which, unless I'm woken up by a crying grandchild, I'm usually doing. And I'm programming my mind to think about that all night. So if I wake up in the middle of the night, I find myself doing affirmations. I find myself doing the first 2 steps of treatment. Actually, I've done the treatment so much that now when my brain goes on idle, and I'm not paying attention to what it's doing at a stop sign or in a grocery store, it immediately starts a spiritual mind treatment for me. And I count on that to keep me centered. So when we have meditations on Wednesday night, when we have centering we center every meeting that we do. We have meditations and centering in everything that we do here at CSLDallas. I have 3 prayer partners. I had a Sangha for a long time, but my schedule was so erratic. It was really, really hard. And I finally had to step out of the Sangha, which was very, very difficult for me. So I'm praying and in meditation with my prayer partners 3 times a week. Karen and I do prayer together, spiritual mind treatment together. And so it's now a lifestyle. And that's where we're going, right? So that our spiritual practice isn't something we just do on the meditation cushion. And it isn't something that we do in time set aside. That's where we start. That's how we learn. That's how we build it. But ultimately, it has to come into our lives. And every moment of our life to the very best of our ability. Do I do it all the time? Of course not. I have not yet turned pink and transcended. When you start seeing the pink, you'll know. You'll know I'm doing it just about all the time. And so that's why it's called a practice. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Great question. All right. Well, I'm going to do one last one very quickly.
I have a question. I have a question on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yay, I'm so excited. Can I read it out? Okay, this is from Jeff. What spiritual practices can help us overcome disappointment? Oh, that's a great question. Very good. Okay. I'm going to just say something really short here, okay? I know. A friend of mine and I, we had this conversation, actually one of my prayer partners, about 5 years ago. And because we had this conversation. Disappointment is one of the steps along the road to spiritual maturity. Disappointment, the spiritual practice of disappointment is an opportunity to examine our attachments, to examine our judgments, to examine our need for things to be the way they are, to examine our desperate desire for the form to be the way it is, and to examine our ability to unconditionally love. The other spiritual practice is to feel the disappointment. Just to look at it, feel it. It's okay to be disappointed. Really, it is. It's okay to be disappointed that you didn't have the ideal family, that your mother wasn't the ideal mother, that the job wasn't what you thought it was going to be. Even that you didn't show up. I get so disappointed with myself when I'm petty. It's my least favorite way of behaving in the entire world. And so to feel the feeling, to allow it to arise, to allow it to flow, and not to own it like that's now my personhood, or that this is now the way life is. To allow it to come and to go and to be with it, and then to see what's there. Sometimes I have to change my perspective. Sometimes I have to talk to somebody. A lot of times it's a little bit of both. Right? And so the spiritual practice is not to avoid the disappointment, not to squish the disappointment, not to throw the disappointment in anybody else's face, right? But to just
reject it.
Right? Be with it, feel it, let it come up, examine what's there to examine, and then ask ourselves, for me, my question is always, what is my spiritual ground to stand in this moment of disappointment? What's the spiritual truth here? This isn't the end of the world. There's something always new in spirit. We'll move through this. There's something I'm not seeing. This person is a child of God just as much as me, and who am I to judge that I'm disappointed? Do you see? I'm finding that spiritual ground upon which to stand so that my disappointment can come and go, but doesn't become some sort of a reality.
Great. Very good.
Thank you for the comment on YouTube, for the question on YouTube.
All right, we have other questions, so what I commit to is the ones who didn't get answered that came in from Facebook, like Teresa and Dallas and things like that. I will answer those online throughout the week on our Facebook page for CSL Dallas. Well, I'll make sure I get the answers and we'll post them. Yes, you'll
Well,
do
we'll
that.
play.
Yes,
We'll both play.
Yeah. All right. So
Good.
thank you. We'll continue to do this at another time, but we love for y'all to be able to ask us anything, and we will keep doing that. So we're going to move into this time and space where I'm going to ask Brad to play a little music and ask Chantel to come on up. And in the meantime, just let's go within to that infinite field of that which is the divine oceanic substance, the thing itself. This one life, this one power, this one presence. This is a life of creativity, of abundance, of beauty. I'm hearing Tariq's voice. Of peace and harmony and boundless love. And as this one life shows up as this, it shows up as each of us. We are the one within the one of the one life. And so I speak the word for each of us and absolutely know that life continues to pour out its blessing into our own lives, into our individualized expression, through connections, great relationships, work that brings us joy, things that we get to give and be and do in our refirement. If we released our positions already in our life, in our families, in our friendships, in our finances. For it's all an expression of this one life. And so we open up to receive the good of our life. And as we do, we continue to pour out a blessing everywhere we go. In our affirmative prayer work, in our smiles, people across the aisles, on the streets, in the stores, in the restaurants. We pour out our love, whether anyone knows it or not, for we are the blessing of life itself. And I'm so grateful to know this. And so it is.